everybody, Sean here from the Mote Marine Lab and Aquarium Education Department, checking in from the field again. Today we're going to go kayaking. This is the second video in a two-part series about mangroves, and I wanted to take you kayaking with me today because this is something we do as a public education program here at the aquarium every month. And so if you're interested in kayaking, we'd love to have you come join us for a kayaking tour one day. But like I said, we're going to go out in the kayaks here in the Sarasota Bay and explore around the mangrove ecosystem. So let's dive in and see what we can find. A couple of things I like to always check before we get in our boats and paddle out into the bay. Safety being first is that we all have PFDs. We are required to have them by law on the boat, but truly you should be wearing your PFD at all times. If you were to fall out of the boat, it wouldn't do you any good to have the PFD on the boat rather than on your body. So we always wear our PFDs. We also bring signaling devices as required by law. So in case we get into any kind of trouble, that way we can signal for help from the shore. I always bring with me a full bottle of water. I have on sunscreen, sun protection, I wear a hat and sunglasses, and I always bring a dry bag with a charged cell phone just for safety's sake in case we get into any kind of a trouble, or I can check a weather forecast as well. So it's always good to be prepared when you're getting on the water like this and to make sure that all your equipment is in working order before you get into the boat and paddle out into the bay. So now that we've made sure that our boat is ready and that we are all prepared to get into the water, we're going to go ahead and launch. We have a nice easterly wind today at about 8 to 10 knots, so it's going to be a beautiful day of paddling. Let's go see what we can find. So just off to our right here is a double-crested cormorant, and actually this is a pretty common seabird that we see in this area. So what these birds will tend to do is dive down into the seagrass beds and try to catch fish that might be hiding in between the seagrass blades. So interestingly, you'll see these perched on top of branches or pilings on docks, usually drying their wings off after they've been diving down into these seagrass beds trying to catch some fish. We'll just kind of hang out and see how long it sits here with us. So we're here in the mangroves, and we're about to enter some of my favorite paddling areas here in these mangrove tunnels. What I'm going to do is, if we see some cool wildlife, I'll point it out. I do want to note that we, as educators at Mote Marine Lab, are permitted to do species collection, and so typically if you see wildlife out in its environment, it is best to leave it alone and just observe it from a distance. For educational purposes, I did want to note, like I said, that we are permitted to do species collection, so if I do see something interesting, for the sake of this video, I'll pick it up and I'll show you for all the viewers at home. Is a great egret, and this is a common wading bird in the southwest Florida area, and you can identify it by its all white body and those long black legs. During mating season, they have a really pretty green around their eyeball as well. So right now what you're seeing is the bird doing a little bit of hunting, looking for crabs here in the shallows, maybe looking for fish that have come in here as well. here. So the first is this species of jellyfish. This is called a Cassiopeia, or an upside down jellyfish. And so what you're looking at are the tentacles, and if we flip it over, you can actually see the bell of the jellyfish on the bottom there. And so what this species does is just sit on the bottom here around these shallow bays and lagoons, and it actually hosts a photosynthetic algal symbiont. That means there's algae quite literally living in the tentacles of this organism, very similar to the way coral does. So this jellyfish sits on the bottom and allows the algae to grow in the sunlight. And what's happening there is the algae is feeding this jellyfish. So if you recall back to the first mangrove video, you'll remember that we talked a little bit about symbiosis. And so basically you have the same relationship here. It's called mutualism. And that means there are two organisms interacting here in this relationship. You have the jellyfish and the algae. And so both organisms are benefiting. The algae gets a free place to live, and the jellyfish gets free food. And so basically, again, this is what we call mutualism. It's a type of symbiosis where two organisms are interacting in the environment and they're both benefiting from this interaction. So we'll let this little guy go. We'll let it sink back down to the bottom there. Again, that's called a Cassiopeia, or an upside down jellyfish, named for the Cassiopeia constellation in the night sky. So the second thing I wanted to show you is this little species of algae. Some people call this the mermaid's teacup, or some people call it the mermaid's wine glass. But it's just a unicellular algae that we see living in these mangrove ecosystems. And so when I say unicellular, I mean quite literally this is one single cell of algae. And so if you zoom in a little bit, and you can see those beautiful little ridges there in the centerpiece of this algae. And you can actually store it on your nose for safekeeping. So one thing that's really interesting that you see sometimes in these mangrove forests is just a slight change in elevation, which brings up an interesting point. A lot of times people ask if these tunnels are man-made or if they're naturally occurring, and the answer is sort of both. So in this area, these tunnels were dug as part of mosquito control, but throughout South Florida, you can see naturally formed mangrove tunnels all across the bottom portion of our state. And so that brings me back to this little interesting bit here, is that this is what we call a spoil island, where the dirt that was dug up, the sediment that was dug up, was kind of put into one location here, and over time what you've seen is a different composition of species that have started to populate in this area. So you see some different species of cactus here, which is really interesting. I see sea purslane over there, which we talked about in our first mangrove video. I see palms that have started to take root over here. I see a sea grape tree way in the back. And so one really interesting theme that you see recurring across South Florida is that just a slight difference in elevation in either the sediment or the bedrock here can mean a totally different composition of species in your ecosystem. Whew, what a great day for a paddle. Well, thanks for joining us. Hopefully you had fun and learned something along the way. If you did enjoy this video, let us know. Leave us a comment, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's Mote Education Online. In the meantime, we'd love to see you for a kayak tour here at the aquarium, so be sure to book a tour with us. This is Shaun Swartz signing off from the field.